I'm open to Module 10, where we will be covering Chapter 11, Theories of Personality. And here is the to-do list in this module. This module will complete week 5 of the class. So the previous module, which had Chapter 10, and then this module with Chapter 11 is what you will be covering for week 5. Here is your objectives. As you can tell, there's a lot covered in the personality chapter. And if you are planning on going into psychology, specifically if you're thinking about going into counseling of any sort, whether it be guidance counseling or marriage and family counseling, or any kind of clinical work, this is a really important chapter. Personality gets to the crux of many of the theories in psychology that govern our views of how we see people and how we explain behavior. So let me just go through these quickly. The very beginning chapter is going to spend a lot of time on Freud. Obviously, Freud was a big name in psychology, but he's known for his psychodynamic theory. We'll be actually coming back to Freud's theory later on in our last week of the class, where we're going to be looking at mental illness. Freud had a lot to say with the origins of mental illness and how we handle ourselves, how we govern sort of our anxieties and the things that manifest into mental illness. So this is going to give you a nice grounding and a nice sort of underpinning for understanding some of the later content that we're going to be covering in the last 2 chapters of the book. So do take some time and spend on Freud's theory, map it out. He had a lot of pieces, a lot of components to his theory, basically looking at the unconscious mind, which is what he felt was a big reservoir of hidden motives and desires that govern and push us to do the things that we do. So it's really important to kind of get a grasp on, what he thought. Now, you don't have to agree with him and all that he offers. In fact, many of the neo-Freudians modified his theory in a number of different ways. Those are going to be some things you're going to want to look at. So people kind of have picked and choose what they prefer to focus on with Freud's theory. He had a lot of good things to say, but he also had a lot of things that were unfounded and didn't lend well to research and didn't have data to support. So definitely understand the theory, and then we're going to come back to it later on. We're also going to be looking at theories of Bandura and Rotter, which were more of the learning theorists. So they were very big on learning from the environment, and that has a lot to say with how we develop our personality. We'll then take a look at the social cognitive view of personality, as well as the humanistic view. You'll be hearing names like Maslow and Rogers, who were big in those areas, and just how very different they are from Freud's theories. They're very much more positive, more focused on the person having more control over who they are, rather than just being a product of their unconscious urges and desires, as Freud suggested. So I find that this view tends to be well received, and it is actually used a lot today in different types of counseling therapies that are employed. Then we'll kind of get into aspects of personality known as trait sources or trait perspective, looking at describing personality via a number of stable traits believed to be stable across the lifespan. This is probably the most modern and current conceptualization of personality that we have. So you'll be learning the 5-factor model, specifically the Big Five view of personality. Some of you may have already heard about this. And we'll be taking a look then also at heritability and environmental influences. We now know that both contribute to personality, not just one or the other. And we'll take a look also at how stressors and how our environment can work with or against our personality traits. How can we cope with stress? Well, it depends on who we are as people. We all don't go to the same types of go-to mechanisms when we're coping with something stressful. Why is that? Why do certain people tend towards one behavior or another to cope with stress? We'll be looking at that as well. And then the conclusion of the chapter will look a little bit at how do we assess personality. So if you want to determine who's who and why do people do what they do, there's a lot embedded in personality inventories that can give you kind of like a snapshot of a person by taking an assessment of them and a comprehensive inventory of questions geared towards gauging different aspects and tenets of a person's personality. You can get a fairly accurate snapshot, and this is why many corporations, employment agencies will often use these kinds of inventories as they're scanning through applications of potential employees, especially agencies like the FBI, any law enforcement agencies, or governmental positions where you're going to be dealing with sensitive materials or critical job where you're dealing with a good deal of stress or trauma. People want to make sure that you have the right temperament, per se, to handle the job. So they might be interested in giving these out, and in fact that's how they started, was to assess how well people would endure during tough times. So I think you'll find that a little interesting there. We'll take a look also at some projective tests which came out of sort of the psychodynamic field, very different from interviews, behavioral assessments, and personality inventories, so you might want to compare and contrast those two a little bit to help see what each is giving and then pros and cons of each. Okay, here are your slides for the chapter, and the videos that you're going to be watching are all in episode 13 of Personality. No extra videos on this one. So those are all in my psych lab. The discussion that you're doing this week has to deal with, the title of it is Racing Against Your Heart, and it has to deal with type A personality. So you're going to be learning all about what type A personality is exactly when you read the main chapter. And then this hop reading really takes a look at, all right, when someone is type A, what does that mean and how can it hurt them? It has some really negative health effects. So you'll be talking about that. I want you giving some research suggestions for why a person would need to change if they have type A personality and how they would even go about changing. As you're going to see when you cover personality, it's hard to change who we are. Personality is pretty stable over the lifespan. Not impossible to change, but difficult. What are some research-based suggestions that the book discusses as to how someone might change? And then the first question, if we just go back here, I kind of wanted you guys to have fun with it a little bit. We all, I think, know someone with type A personality. Try to give some examples of who you know. Like a brother, a mother, father, whoever, a friend. And then say, well, in what ways are they type A? Now remember to make sure that you've got all the components of type A. Typically, people think of someone who's organized and maybe really competitive or gets, um, perfectionist. Those are all definitely qualities that fall under type A, but one of the biggest ones I think that students often miss is hostility. Type A people are very aggressive, hence the competitiveness. When they don't get what they want, they can get very angry. When things don't go right, they can get very angry. These are your, aggressive drivers. So that's really the main component, which is what makes it so health compromising. Because if you're stressing yourself out all the time and causing a degree of um, rage sort of inside, it increases your blood pressure. And over time, this is not good. It can lead to high blood pressure and ultimately negative consequences like heart attack or stroke. So, those are some things to be thinking about as you're going through your discussion. Your quiz number 10, and then exam number 5, which is covering chapters 10 and 11. And that does it for the module and for the week. But of course, if you have any questions, please let me know.